Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Ipswich, brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. It is Thursday. This would normally be reserved for a crossover episode, but as it is the fourth round of the FA Cup this weekend, where Town are making the trip to Coventry, unfortunately there is not a Coventry podcast on the GSPN network for us to link up with, so I have a bonus wildcard episode today to fill the gap on your Thursday. I'm on my own today. It's just me, Rob Binns, going to run through. And the plan for today's episode is we are going to have a review of the January transfer window. We're going to look through the ins, the outs, areas that maybe potentially have been missed or we felt they should have been more looked into than they have been. And then I'm going to wrap the episode up. I'm going to give the window an overall grade as of now, having, like we say, a few days out from the window closing. And then we can always reassess back at the end of the year and see whether that grade proved to be accurate or not, depending on once we've got sort of 3 or 4 months of seeing these players in action. But let's get straight into it then. Let's start off with the incomings. There's 5 of them in total, 4 into the first team squad and 1 into the youth setup, which was, say, in order of when they signed, it was obviously Ben Godfrey came in on a 6-month loan from Atalanta to shore up the defensive options. That was fairly quickly followed by Jayden Philogene from Aston Villa for £22 million plus add-ons. And so a deal we looked like we were going to get done for a cheaper price in the summer before Villa nabbed it, but we finally got our man 6 months later. Then Julio Enciso came in on a 6-month loan from Brighton, taking up our final domestic loan spot we had available. Obviously, Calvin Phillips taking up the other one from his move in the summer. Then on deadline day, Somto Boniface came in from Chelsea to be part of the youth setup. And Alex Palmer was brought in from West Brom for £2 million. So let's say 5 signings in total, 4 of them entering the first team squad. And you have to say, on paper, it looks like very good business. You have to say they've gone for. We spoke about it on the show another day that as Premier League experience has been brought in. So Enciso, despite only turning 21 on the day he signed, has had a considerable amount of Premier League football in the last year and a half, and you consider how long he's been injured during that time frame as well. I think he's got 50 plus appearances, so adds that experience into our attacking options. So far from what we've seen as well, in 1 cameo off the bench against Liverpool and 90 minutes against Southampton, he looks really sharp. Certainly serve a player who missed the majority of last season with a long-term injury. He certainly looks sharp, and I think this will be a very mutually beneficial move, that one. I think it gives him a chance to showcase himself, and obviously hopefully we'll get a few goals and assists out of him as well. And like I say, it already looks like he's going to be a bright spark in the attack, so that probably of the 5 is the one I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out the most. But obviously Philogene's come in as well. Like I said, that we thought we had him in the summer, didn't we? And then Aston Villa pulled out the matching rights, but it hasn't worked out for him there. Come in, £22 million is a lot of money, especially in January. But so potentially, you could argue maybe a winger high on the priority list. I would have said I wouldn't have put it maybe as high as some other positions, but it was certainly on there for me. Obviously, this is before Burns got injured as well. I say if we'd known that was going to happen, and Burns would also then end up out for the season, that 100% a winger would have been right up there. So it was almost preemptive business in that case, because we did think a right-sided player was going to be someone who's looked into. Obviously, with Ogbene's injury picked up against Brentford, and so Philogene's come in. We know obviously McKenna's a big fan of him. We thought we had him in the summer, but we've waited 6 months later. We spent more money on him now than then. He's not had much chance to express himself at this level. When we go back to that experience argument, I think he's just had 4 Premier League appearances for Villa, 1 start. I think it's something like that in the first half. But he did play 90 minutes in the Champions League against Bayern Munich in a game Villa won. So he has had some good early experiences despite only being a young player as well. So I haven't seen much of him yet. So just a few. He's come on. He's had some tough times to try and present himself, really. He hasn't played from the start yet. I think the FA Cup, we'll see him from the start for the first time. He signed just before the previous round, but didn't get a chance, but too late to make the squad. came on against City at the score 4 or 5-0 down, so it was always going to be tough for him. That then came on against Liverpool at 4-0, 3 or 4-0 down as well, so it was going to be tough again. So we'll see how it plays out. He had a little cameo against Southampton as well, which he doesn't look as sharp as Enciso yet, but obviously a long way to go, and we know the quality's there. We saw it with Hull last year, so should be a good addition there. And obviously, like I say, at the point we signed, we already knew we'd lost Ogbene for the season. Since then, we've gone on to lose Burns for the season, so certainly a good bit of quality to have on that right-hand side as we seem to say as our options seem to be dropping like flies as the season goes on to unfortunate injuries. Then Ben Godfrey's come in. Obviously, that was for me was one of the priority positions. That sort of, I call it the Twanzebe role, as someone who could play centre back or right back, or alternatively say slot into a 3. Just the versatility and all the different options we try at the back. And Godfrey suits that perfectly. Obviously, primarily a centre half, but he made pretty much every Premier League appearance he made after signing for Everton was at right back, so he's well versed there. He's always been good on the ball. I particularly thought that was the qualities that got him a move when Norwich got relegated. He's been a good defender on the ball, which leans itself to moving out to full back at times, or like I say, or a wide centre back in a 3. And from what we've seen so far, he's obviously another one who's had to spend a lot of time on the bench while he gets used to the squad and the style of football and everything. But he played in the FA Cup, he got a debut, and I actually thought Man City, I said it at the time, it feels an odd thing to say when you lose 6-0, but I thought he had a very good game against Man City, particularly sort of while it was 0-0, when we had our sort of best spell of the game while it was goalless. I thought he almost playing as an overlapping centre-back in the early stages there, which say brave against a team like City, but he had the confidence to do it on his first league start for the club. So I think there's good things to come there. I think he was certainly, if Tanzebi's back fit now, he will be first choice in that area. But I do think Godfrey maybe force his way in, maybe perhaps next to O'Shea in the middle, because we seem to be unsure whether Burgess or Greaves or Wolfie or whoever plays. O'Shea's the only nailed on starter at centre back, so maybe Godfrey can push himself in there. Also, if not, he certainly provides a very solid squad option. So I think that one's going to work out as well. And then Alex Palmer coming in on deadline day. That we knew that was an area that needed targeting, didn't we? We spoke about it at depth on Tuesday's episode this week. Obviously reacting to the Southampton game, and spoke about it on Monday as well, that the club sprung this Walton injury that, again, the latest edition of nothing being made public until after the event. You just suddenly see the team sheet Saturday afternoon, Walton's out the squad completely. We know he's out injured. Few weeks, I think it is, but perhaps maybe more, but with a groin injury. Muric, we spoke about it in depth this week, so I won't go over it again, but he's an active hindrance for a variety of reasons when he's playing at the moment. So the club they've took action on it, which it's good to see, because Richard said it yesterday. If there's a time for a key player in your squad to pick up an injury, you want it to be in January, really, because you have time to go and deal with the situation. That's what we've done. We've had the Walton injury. It's not as much as it caught us supporters out on that when that team sheet came out on the Saturday. The club have obviously known throughout the week, and they could already put something to work, maybe behind the scenes, looking at potential goalie options. And then so that Muric performance against Southampton certainly would have given him a little boost. And Palmer has been one of the top keepers in the Championship for the last couple of years, especially. Has a very good. So West Brom are a very good defensive side, and as a result of that, so he's got a decent back four in front of him. But you have to have a good goalkeeper as well. He's made some top saves, and his clean sheet stats are very good in the Championship. And I think he's ready to make the step up. He's only 28 as well, so good age for a goalie. He got 10 years in him at least. So I think it's a good option. And so I say it'll be interesting to see when Walton comes back from injury. Does he go straight back in, or has Palmer been signed to be the number one for the rest of this season, at least anyway? But we spent £24 million in January on top of the 100 and something spent in the summer. So McKenna's been backed again. And so there's been some decent loan signings coming in as well. Some more money been spent. So I think we're at around about 130 million quid over both windows this season. So we're giving it a go. We've spent big to try and keep the Premier League status. Has not got off to an ideal start, but so there's a long way to go. And certainly, I said it to Richard the episode the other day. We posed the question as, do you think the squad is in a stronger position at the end of January than it was at the start? And you'd have to say yes, looking at those names that have come in, that's the first hurdle. That as long as they feel like the squad has progressed, now we've got to go see what these players can produce over the last 3 months or so of the season, and hopefully it can get us over the line and see us into the Premier League for a second year. But on paper, so four names coming in really for the first team squad. Ben Godfrey, Jaden Finnegy, Nulio and Ciso and Alex Palmer on paper looks like a very good window, and certainly for the teams down the bottom, probably the best January window on paper in terms of when you look at who's come in of the teams down the bottom, which hopefully will give us a boost and we can kick on now. But certainly in terms of the ins, I'm happy with the window that's happened. The players that have come in all look very. I think will have a big impact on the season. So it's a win for me on the comings in. But we're going to have a quick break now to hear from one of the sponsors, and then we're going to be talk about the outgoings that happened over the course of January. This podcast is brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. The Global Sports Podcast Network is changing the face of football podcasting with dedicated daily content for every Premier League team, women's football, fantasy football, and a daily Premier League wrap-up broadcasted in 5 different languages. It's your one-stop shop for your daily football fix, and you can find all podcasts on the GSBN network on all your usual streaming platforms. Global Sports Podcast Network. Every club, every day. And welcome back to part 2 of your Thursday Daily Ipswich. So we covered the ins. We'll look into the outs. It wasn't as busy in terms of links here and there for players going out. That 4 left in total. Again, 3 from the first team squad and 1 from within the youth setup. Well, so the first one actually came back to go again. George Edmondson, been on loan, obviously, at Middlesbrough, rather surprisingly was recalled back. So we weren't expecting him to call from his loan because he was getting regular game time at Middlesbrough. He was seeming very popular there, and he suddenly come back. So you sensed the feeling was there that he was coming back to be sold permanently. So it happened at a lot of scenarios over the course of January, particularly say teams down the bottom, the likes of Leicester, for example, with Tom Cannon, the example I used there, were called him from Stoke and sold him to Sheffield United. So you thought that was the route we were going to go down, but actually it turned out to be the latest Mark Ashton masterclass in that Middlesbrough knew they had another 6 months on the loan, and they wanted to buy. They were ideally wanting to buy him in the summer, and the sort of money they were putting on the table to sort of get a deal over the line to let him see the loan out and then be signed was nowhere near what we want. I think they were offering around 300,000, something like that, to try and get him on a permanent in the summer. But then Ashton and the team, they weren't having it. They said that's nowhere near what we want. We'll scrap your loan. Brought him back, and then Middlesbrough come back in a few days later with a bid of £710,000 and plus add-ons, which could near enough double that if the reports are true and they're all hit on the add-ons. So an Ashton masterclass on that front, got them almost twice as much money out of it, just over twice as much money out of Middlesbrough. And sees Edmondson move there on a permanent. And it's a move that makes sense. He was in that category in the summer, wasn't he? That we put a few players in, especially when we done our sort of keep, sell, loan on the podcast early on. He was in the category of someone who didn't get as much game time as they would have liked in the Championship last year. So for that reason, you'd expect them to have moved on either a loan or a permanent move in the summer. That turned out to be a loan. He has got as another member of the promotion squad out the door, unfortunately, as he leaves. As he's now, up in Teesside on a permanent basis. But again, I feel like in terms of the squad, he wasn't really going to come in and play regular Premier League football, you wouldn't think. So makes sense in a way that he does move on a permanent basis. And then another one who left on a permanent basis from the youth setup, Osman Foyo, went off to AFC Wimbledon. And that one, again, sort of, we've seen Boniface come into the youth setup for Foyo, who never played a first team game, but was certainly seen as an important player in the youth levels over the last couple of years. He's been sent out on loan to the 6th tier a couple of times, done very well this year. I think something like 12 goals in 20 games, something like that at Chelmsford City this season. So the fee hasn't been made public, but we've offloaded him to AFC Wimbledon see him try his hand at full-time professional football now. So you wish him all the best and say. So we had Boniface we had one come in, one come out at the youth team level. So obviously it'll be interesting to see from afar. You never know. He might be a bit like Harry Clark. He might come back down the line maybe after establishing himself. Even though it wasn't academy, but even a Kiefer Moore, just go off somewhere else, drop down divisions, establish yourself, and then end up coming back as a completely better player. So see how he plays out. And then there was 2 loan moves down to the Championship, again, fairly high up on the list of what we expected to happen coming into January. We did say Harry Clark and Ali Al-Hamadi. We thought they would both be moved on in order to free up squad spaces to let some new signings in. Obviously, we can only have our 25-man squad, so naturally clear up 2 spaces and say a straight swap almost in Clark's case with Godfrey coming in. You thought at the start of the window these 2 would drop down to the Championship on loan, maybe even on a permanent, but certainly in Clark's case, when Godfrey came through the door in the first week of January, that you knew at that point he was more than likely going to be heading out. But he's gone off to Sheffield United, who seem to have made all sorts of signings over the course of January, almost trying to buy their way up to promotion in the Championship, but snatched him off their rivals. I remember the story broke almost that a formal approach had been made by Sheffield Wednesday for Clark. You think that'd probably be quite a good fit for him, going down there. Danny Roll's a good manager, and then suddenly a few hours later it breaks that Sheffield United have also come in and have pipped him to it, and he's heading off there. So that's one interesting to see what sort of reception he gets in the Steel City derby later in the season. After it looked like he might well have been going to one side and then jumped over to the other one, but again, he's a fan favourite, Clark, and he's like I said, he's almost the fan proxy on the team, isn't he? That it's sort of, it's almost like because he's a lifelong fan. You see what he's like with the fist bumps at the end of games. You saw him in the promotion celebrations. It felt like someone almost living your dream. They say you love them for it. That it's nice, like, to have someone who loves the club that much playing and starting every week in the lower divisions, being there for the success. It's nice to see. So they are only loans who come back in the summer, but so hopefully Ian has a good spell there at Sheffield United and come back a better player and fight for his place again next year. And Al-Hamadi as well looked like he was off to West Brom at one point. That sort of fell through. Then he moved on to Stoke City instead. Probably a better fit for him, I would say. I wasn't sure when I saw it was West Brom initially. I didn't know if that was necessarily the right move for him. I had my doubts at the time. Then it fell through, and say Stoke, I feel like to me he's more likely to get consistent minutes at Stoke, and then especially obviously in the end West Brom gone and got the likes of Adam Armstrong on loan instead. That I think Al-Hamadi would have struggled to get minutes over if they moved ahead with that and kept him as well. But I think it'll be a good move for him. That he's struggled this season. Obviously, it's been a big problem when Delap's gone off. And he's been the one coming on because he can't doubt his work ethic, how much he runs around and puts himself about, but he just doesn't provide anywhere near the same goal threat as Delap. And it's almost like our goal once he comes on at times this year, that's killed off our goal threat for the rest of the game in some cases. So it was a move that had to be made. And to be fair to him, like we say, he only signed a year ago. He jumped from sort of high mid-table League Two to a Championship promotion race on short notice, scored a few goals, done a decent bit part role off the bench, and then suddenly he's been thrust up another division into the Premier League. Like I say, it's easy to forget a year ago, or just over a year ago, he's playing League Two football. So I think a drop down to a Championship team like Stoke, I hope he does well, and I think it will do good for him to get some more regular minutes and hopefully get a few goals as well. And overall, we can't fault really. No one. Edmondson out on a permanent, but say who wasn't part of the squad anyway. Two players who were in the squads but not getting too many minutes have been loaned out. on the outside, there's always a worry that some of your better players might get poached if teams start looking. Obviously, there was all sorts of talk going on with the Lap after 6 months after signing him. But we'll see how it works out. But so in the end, we kept on the key players. A few of the squad ones have gone out. Ultimately, it's the best you can hope for as a team down the bottom in January. As long as there's no big major outgoings, you've done something right. So we've done well on that front. We've done well on the ins. We've done on who has come in. I've now said we've done well on the outs. So when we come back from this other short break, we're going to look at maybe some areas that were missed and that may well bring a grading down on what so far seems like a very good window. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and Zencastr came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. And we are back for the final part of today's episode of the Daily Ipswich. So let's talk about we've talked about the positives of the window, so overall happy with the ins and the outs, but there were some key areas we felt were missed. We've raised on the podcast a lot of the times over the window. We were sort of waiting that, is this the week we start getting linked with someone in this position? So we kept having, it never happened in the end. We kept waiting for it. We never got it in the end. And of course, I'm mainly talking here about a midfielder. We've spoken a lot about this on the podcast. It's something all four of us unanimously agreed coming into January was a position that we felt should have been a priority, but seems like hasn't been the case for the hierarchy at the club. Because like we say, there was early on in the window, there was a couple of links to Nemanja Matic, which you all sort of knew was never going to happen. And then the whole window went quiet again as the window was about to close. There was apparently a slight interest in Flynn Downs, which we spoke about on yesterday's episode. But so to go from pretty much the first week of the window of something you knew was never going to happen, to then 3 weeks of silence in that area, and then another rumour very late in the window you knew wasn't going to happen again. It's disappointing in my opinion, that it's an area that I think one of the key reasons we have lost some of the games that you maybe felt we could have got something out of is because the midfield keeps getting overrun. It's been a big thing this year. You've seen the likes of Newcastle, obviously, when they have their good performances because their midfield's dominated the game. You saw it with Arsenal against Man City this weekend, that so often you win the midfield battle, you set yourself up in a very good position to win the game. And how many times can we say we've won the midfield battle over 90 minutes in games this year, that we just haven't got that balance right? Because Kouste's obviously come in, he struggled for minutes in the early points, but since sort of early November around the Spurs game, he's come in and he's looked fantastic in pretty much every game he's played. That's what we need. We haven't got anyone like him. That's the problem. He's fantastic when he plays. He's a key part of the team, but he goes off after 70, 75 minutes every game, and then we don't have a direct replacement. So then that all the positive he brings to the game fades away as we have to swap it out. We've got Morsey and Phillips who are just almost identical in their playing styles. I mean, you lose so much by playing them together and not having a Kouste or somebody in there. It just seemed to me like from something like that was probably might have even been my number one spot for where to go and sign somebody in January. It seemed like such a problem position that we could help. So either you sign someone, because Morsey's been struggling this year. He started really well, but struggled. Phillips is obviously he's not hit the ground running at all. He's had the odd good game here and there. He's had a few bad games as well. He's struggled for consistency. That you think you'd either go and sign somebody to go in next to Kouste and make these two fight for the place, try and fight for a place back over whoever comes in, or if nothing else, you maybe they're a rotation option who can play, that we can bring on when Kouste gets tired after 70 minutes or so, and have more of a direct match. But so nothing's happened, and for me that's a big miss. And I think we'll probably, because of that, I think we're going to continue to see the midfield overrunning games, and that will ultimately going to cost us points over the course of what's left of the season. I think this could be a big error potentially when you look back with the benefit of hindsight in May. You might go back and I wonder if we will be. So the hierarchy at the club will be going back and thinking that should a midfielder have been targeted. And I think that for me, I feel like this is going to be something we're going to regret come the end as the season continues plays out. Because at the moment, I say a Kayuse injury, and then we're just short and we're just light on options there anyway. Really, let's say a Kayuse injury now, then you've got Morsey and Phillips playing there. Like I say, it hasn't worked them two together. They're too similar. You don't get a right balance in the midfield, them two there, and then. I said we're just so short on options there. You think about the rotation. So we had an issue at centre backs. We brought Godfrey and an issue on the right hand side with lack of players. So we got Philogene in. We've said Ciso bolsters the attacking options and allows and can play in a couple of positions. It allows us there to cover some injuries as well. We've had an injury in goals. We've brought a new one in, but we've got fairly good depth in pretty much every position. But then in the middle of the park, we've got Morsey, Kayuse, Phillips, sort of competing for the spots. You've then got Taylor, who could play there if he has to, but isn't. He's better further forwards in the 10 rather than being in the 2. Then you've got Luongo, who's barely played any games this season, doesn't make the bench most weeks. That we're so short on options in the midfield. To the fact it's not even. It seems like it's not even been looked at, because there's not even been realistic links going about over the course of the window. That it seems to have been completely neglected, which for me is a big stickling point for this window that, like I say, I feel like we might come to regret that later on. But obviously the other area that was very much bigged up is a striker. And we didn't get one again, did we? That it seems to be they've gone the approach of we've got enough people who could play striker in a way. Obviously Hurst we spoke about the problem. I spoke about it earlier when saying about Al Hamadi when he comes on. Doesn't have the same. We know Delap because of how hard Delap works. He's going to tire himself out almost. He can't. He doesn't get 90 minutes the majority of games because he's tired himself out of them. Say running around, taking the game to the defenders, and it's almost been like Delap goes off, and then we just sort of that's it. That's our goal threat gone at that point. He comes off in the 80th minute. We don't look like scoring for 10 minutes, and then. So we don't have the sort of options off the bench, like we say. But obviously, Hurst coming back from injury proves that Hurst has looked good in the times he's played off the bench. He should have scored against Liverpool, but the fact he was there and in the position to get the chance is an improvement on where we were a couple of months ago. His game obviously started against Brentford and scored, so Hurst being back, but he's had such torrid luck with injuries recently that you can't guarantee him staying fit for the rest of the season. So. We have got them, and Ciso could go up front if you need to. Schmodix could go up front if you need him to, but they're not. It's not the primary positions they're going to be used in. But you just think, how many times leading up to January do we say we're crying out for a striker, and then we've come out the other side of January, and we had a 3-man, we had 3 options at striker going into January, and we've come out with 2. And how many times are we screaming in the window to go and get somebody? And we've come out of it with less strikers, less out and out strikers than you had coming into it when it was seen as one of the big problem positions. That I'm not saying you don't want to. It's going to be difficult. It's January, clubs don't want to sell their consistent strikers who perform at a high level. You're going to struggle to get them in January because the clubs don't want to let them go because then they're in the problem. They've got the problem then of finding the replacement who can do a job and. You're more likely going to end up overpaying maybe for some people in January as well. It's a really tough market, generally January, but especially for strikers to pick up someone who's had a good first half of the season in January. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and the club's going to be very, very reluctant to do it. So it's always going to be tough. But again, we haven't really tried. That's been more the issue. That there's not been many concrete links. There's been a few conversations dotted about that. So normally Ipswich are one of the clubs who have an interest in this player, and then nobody ends up bidding for him. There's been no sort of concrete links to any strikers. Again, it almost feels like we've ignored it to look at other positions. But then, look, obviously I praised and so I think he looks really sharp, and I think he'll be a good addition. But we had that. If we had a Premier League loan spot, that might have been the best way to get a striker, and we've got. we've gone for as good as I think it will work out the Enciso signing, but I wonder where the priority is that you've gone and looked at almost a number 10 who's a very similar build to a lot of the other players we have to play in that 3. You've gone to another one there when we have Hutchinson, we had Philogene brought in already, we've got Chaplin when he's back fit. That was that more of a priority to go for than a striker or a midfielder? Look, so if obviously, I suppose it's probably a case if you find out Enciso's available, you go and make the move for him because we've seen the level he's had in previous years especially before he got that long injury, that maybe that opened up, they jumped at the chance. But still got somebody recruiting him to play that position when there was and we say that a midfielder or a striker hadn't been almost looked at is slightly concerning to me. And again, I don't know if it will be as big of an issue as not signing a midfielder, but certainly if Hurst gets injured again, like we say, he's had his horrible luck. If he gets injured again, we're in big trouble, because then what are we looking at when we get to the point if Delap comes off, or Galap gets injured as well? That again, I talk about lack of depth in midfield. We've got a serious lack of depth up front now, that we are an injury away from really struggling for periods of games or whole games completely, which is my concern in that area of the pitch. But let's wrap up then today's episode. We've discussed the players that have come in, the players that have gone out, and areas that I think we should have made more of an effort to recruit in. So I'll give the January transfer window an overall grade, all things considered. I'm going to go with a B. I think that there was a list of sort of key positions I said coming into it, that I think I said 4 positions that I would like to see, which was a right-sided player, a centre-back, a Twanzebe role of centre-back, right-back sort of player, a striker, a midfielder, and then given the events of the window played out, you then throw a goalkeeper in there. We got 3 out of 5 of them. And like I say, in Enciso, should that position have been a priority for recruitment? Probably not, but I think it's a good opportunity. I think it's a loan that will benefit the player and us as well. I really like the look of him from what I've seen so far, so I'm hoping that will work out. And like I say, the four names that have come into the first team squad, I think will all be good additions. And so you've managed to clear room for it by moving some of the players who won't get as many minutes out on loan or out permanently. That overall, like I say, the business that has been done, I think has been very good. But I can't give it an A for me, because arguably the top 2 positions I thought of coming into it hasn't been recruited. So that knocks it down. That if I was rating purely the business that had been done, I'd give it an A, because I think it's a strong window, particularly in comparison to the likes of Leicester and Southampton, or Wolves, even some of the teams doing the business down there. I think we've had the best window of the teams down the bottom, but so purely on the business that's been done, it would be an A. But I can't not factor in the business that hasn't been done, almost, in the 2 key areas of the pitch. Like, it's more so that nobody's been bought, like I said, because January's tough to get the right players in. But almost the fact that there's been no talk about it, really. There was, apart from that midfielder, say there was the Matic links week 1, the Downs links with 2 hours to go, nothing in between. A striker was there was a few names floated about in the first week of the window, and then we never heard anything again. That feels like the 2 priority positions have not even been looked at, which I feel like could very much come back to bite us. But like I say, the business we have done, though, I do think is very good. So overall, I grade a January transfer window a B. Interesting to see how any of our listeners rank the transfer window. Let us know on our socials at GSPN Ipswich on all platforms. Let us know what you think of the transfer window and what grade you would give it on the old school letters system. Now, I'm going with a B, and we'll see. So we can come back to this at the end of the season and see did B work out as a fair grade, or maybe has it all passed all expectations and I should have given it an A star. We'll see. But before we've seen too much of any of the signings, I think a B is a fair enough grade. And that closes out today's episode. So thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with a preview for the trip to Coventry in the 4th round of the FA Cup. Like I say, until then, you can keep up with us on our socials at GSPN Ipswich. And until then, we will see you tomorrow.
Every club, Global Sports Podcast Network.